Hello, everyone. I'm Celeste Headlee. I'm the host of the Conference for Women podcast, Women Amplified, and the moderator for today's live Q&A with Katie DiGregorio, Talent Acquisition Lead at Takeda Pharmaceuticals. We are so excited that you're joining us today. That's not a lie for this Massachusetts Conference for Women virtual career fair. We're offering this to you because we know it can be so helpful. There are top employers with us today looking to fill thousands of job openings and get as many women as possible back to work. And I'm joined today by a talent acquisitions leader with more than 10 years of experience in recruiting, Katie DiGregorio. Over the next 30 minutes, Katie will answer your questions live about the job search process, and she'll give you the inside scoop on the hiring process from a recruiter's perspective. You can ask questions real time using the chat feature. So, first of all, Katie, thank you so much for joining us today. Maybe you could start by telling us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Thanks, Celeste, and thanks everyone for joining today. I'm very excited to be here. It's an honor to be here with you all. So I started my career in recruiting, sort of a non-traditional start. I was working in a career services setting and was pursuing my graduate degree at Suffolk University, and then transitioned over to the corporate world and worked at Sanofi and Genzyme recruiting there for a number of years, and now working at Takeda. I think working in the biotech and pharma industry is super exciting. There's a lot of us in the Cambridge, Boston area. It's a hub, and just happy to be here to answer any questions.
Well, we already have questions lined up for you. So let me start with these ones that have come in even before we got started. And this first one, I have to imagine, is on a lot of people's minds, which are, is there such a thing as a red flag on a resume? Something that maybe you see on a resume that makes you immediately think, not this one.
Well, I'd like to just start by saying that everything I'm saying today is from my perspective. All recruiters obviously can think differently and have different ideas of what's the right way to do something. But I would recommend being as succinct as you can, but also not leaving off important details. So I would say, like, a red flag could potentially be too much information, where there's too much text. It takes too long to get through descriptions of your work experience. That would be just harder for recruiters and hiring managers to get through, I would say.
I'm sorry, just one
Yeah,
clarification.
yeah,
Do you mean like too many
yes.
pages to the resume, or do you mean like individually when I've written out my work experience, there's a big chunk of text?
I would say that's a great point, Celeste. I would say the description under a work experience, if it could be bulleted, that's my preference. And I know that that's a very easy way to make sure that it's summarized succinctly as far as your experience. Um, I think too many pages can really depend. Obviously, people with PhDs will have a more formal CV with multiple pages, and I personally don't have any issues with a 2 to 3 page resume. That's no problem to me, for me. And also, like, I think we get hung up on making sure that the text fills the full page. If there's like a page and a half, that doesn't bother me either. I think as long as it's a detailed summary, but not too over the top, I would say. And that, if you're thinking of it from a recruiter or hiring manager's perspective, are you able to read through it and get what you need out of that document? I think one thing I do want to say, and I'll say this throughout the time we have today, as much as you can customize your resume, we all know that writing a resume takes time. It can be painful, right? Because you're applying to multiple positions in some cases. You have to create different versions of your resume, but as much as you can customize your resume for the job you want and for the job that you're applying for, it's so much better for us on the hiring side to be able to look through it and know that you've taken that time and effort to make sure that you're aligning your skill sets with what we're looking for.
To that end, I mean, another detail there. The next question was recommendations you might have, to just craft your resume in a way where you will not be discriminated about against based on your age. Is it okay to remove the dates when you earned your degree, for example, or any other indications that might tell the recruiter how old you are?
So I would like to say that I would hope that recruiters lead with an unbiased view when they're looking at resumes and considering candidates. I would never worry about age. That's not something that would come up for me at all. And I know that hiring managers, at least that I've worked with, would never worry about that either. You can definitely leave off the dates on degrees. That's not a problem. It's very important that you leave dates on your work experience so we know how long you've worked at different places in whatever roles, because that directly is tied to the years of experience that you have and how qualified you are for the position.
Okay, so how do you demonstrate leadership skills? This is the next question. If you only manage a small team of one or two people. In other words, if I'm applying for a leadership position, does my experience leading one or two people count?
It absolutely counts. And I would say that as much as you can, again, customize your resume, your descriptions of your leadership experience on paper. That's super helpful. So providing examples. And then when you're prepping for an interview, and if they're asking about specific leadership experience, make sure you come prepared with examples of how you've led your team and used those skills in real life. I think those concrete examples just make the world of difference when you're speaking about your experience level and eligibility for a role.
Okay, next question, and I love this one. How much power do recruiters actually have? From my lens, our participant says it seems like they have a lot.
That's a really good question. I would like to say that as a recruiter, it is our job, and it's important to think of it this way, where we're supporting the hiring teams at a company. And so we are in a true partnership with the hiring leaders that we are supporting and identifying candidates for. So I would say that the power, I mean, I don't, there's not really all that much power for recruiters because ultimately the hiring manager is making the decision on who they would like to hire for the role. And so while we do present candidates to hiring teams, of course, and make recommendations based on applicable work experience, the decision is completely in the hands of the team, the experts that are hiring people into roles for their groups.
Okay, so oftentimes in job interviews, one of the questions, or I guess one of the things you're asked to do is tell me about yourself. So our next question is, that's such a vague question. What's a strong way to answer it?
I think the best way to answer that question is to provide a succinct overview of your career journey and to end that question or that answer, I should say, with tying it to the position that you're applying for and the company that you're applying for. If you can, like it's important to be able to share why this position speaks to you. Why are you passionate about the role? What is it about the company that you're applying to that you're interested in? And that will really set you apart as far as, telling someone about yourself can be about your career journey, what you're passionate about, what you've done in your career, but then also tying it to the role and why you're interested in that opportunity.
So we get this question a lot. This next question is about how long do you wait before you follow up? If you haven't heard, it's say you had a job interview that went really, really well. How many days, weeks do you wait before circling back? But I want to add something to this because we get this question so much. And oftentimes recruiters say it's okay to follow up. And I wonder, what can you say to applicants to make them feel a little bit more confident and a little less insecure about following up because they seem to be really afraid that they're bothering the recruiter?
Mhm. I personally have no problem when candidates follow up. And I would say every few days to every week and a half, by a week and a half cadence is totally fine, especially if you've built that or relationship or partnership with the recruiters, not partnership, but you've spoken with them, you've had that initial call with them, you're checking in. And I don't see any issue with following up, reaching out for an update. That's just from my perspective. I will say that recruiters are busy. We have, in some cases, we'll have recruiters working on many, many jobs, right? So they have people contacting them all the time. So if it takes some time for a recruiter to get back, it's not that they're ignoring your request for feedback or want, feeling annoyed or whatever it might be. But they really can just come down to them being busy, and then ultimately, hopefully, the recruiter will get back to you with the decision, and you'll get an answer as far as what the next steps will be. But I personally think every week and a half. And if you are, another thing I think I should add to that is if you're interviewing with another company and you're getting the sense that an offer is coming or you're nearing the end of the process with them, it's a great idea to update the recruiter for the other role that you're interviewing elsewhere, how things are going. I know I always appreciate it when candidates keep me posted. That's one thing I always say is keep me posted on your job search. Let me know if you're nearing the end of a process and you're expecting an offer, just so we can stay competitive with a timeline that a candidate may have.
Do applicants need to be worried about doing that so that it doesn't sound like they're threatening you? Like, if you don't hire me soon, I'm going to take this other job. Like, how do you thread that needle?
Again, this is all coming from my perspective. I truly appreciate it when I get that feedback from candidates. Again, it's on my phone screen list as far as something I ask of them. I don't see it as a threat. I just know how competitive this job market is, and I want to hire the best people for my company. So if I can know if there's something else in process, it's super helpful.
Okay, next question. And this has also been a very common question especially since this pandemic, which is what advice do you have for someone who is hoping to transition into a new industry? Are there particular skills one might highlight? Let's say that I want to transfer into the pharmaceutical industry and I don't have that on my resume. What are the skills? Maybe I don't have the specific experience, but what skills could I highlight to let the recruiter know that I'm a quick learner or I could easily adapt? Is it possible to break into a new sector without having to start at entry level?
So I think it's twofold. So one, it's networking as much as you possibly can. So whether that's with the alumni association at your school, or if it's a more experienced professional, if it's casting a wide net with your network on LinkedIn and seeing if there are network like connections that you have that work in the pharma industry, and then setting up informational interviews or just casual coffee chats to learn more about the industry. That's a great way to network and to basically put your feelers out there as far as expressing your interest in a new industry. The other thing is the same theme. It's customizing your resume as much as you possibly can, pulling out the skill sets that you have that pertain to the position that you're applying for. And in doing that as much as it's really putting in that legwork so that the recruiters and hiring managers know that you have that strong interest. And then perhaps it is seeing if there's local events that you could attend to network with pharmaceutical professionals, for example. Anything that you can do to get yourself out there to learn more about the industry, to make connections is helpful.
Okay, next question. What is a good way to reach out to hiring managers or recruiters to set up informational interviews? And is there a good time to do that?
That's a really great question, Celeste. I think in some cases there will be recruiters that do not have the bandwidth to do that, and that's just the reality of day to day work. We all have our day jobs, right? And so My recommendation when it comes to informational interviews is to try to work through the networks that you do have to see if there are connections and then if there can be introductions that are made. Like, for example, a friend of mine connected me with their friend who was interested in recruiting. We had a nice conversation. Like, that's a great way to do it. I realize that that's a perk that some people may not have, right? If they're newer to this area, for example, or another area in the US where they're looking to work. So in that case, um, the one thing I would warn against is if you do reach out to people on LinkedIn that you don't know, you may not hear back. It's probably likely that you won't. So it's really pulling from the networks that you do have. Again, going to your school. Is there an alumni association where you can get connected? There's often career advisors at schools that work with alumni, and it's all about pulling from the networks that you have to then ultimately get an introduction to set up that informational call.
So that was exactly what our next question was about, suggestions on how to reach out and network with recruiters on LinkedIn. Is there a good protocol for that? In other words, if I'm going to reach out to a recruiter, is that first outreach, should that be brief, or should I just go ahead and say, hey, I'm looking to perhaps move into your industry. Here's all the information. Here's my resume. Here's all this stuff ready for you to go. Like, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, I would say that any form of outreach to a recruiter is totally fine on LinkedIn. It's a public social media platform where we're all posting jobs that we're wanting to fill. So why not reach out to us and check in? I am the first one to admit that I receive many messages every day. And so I'll do my best to respond. And then just knowing that that could be the case with the recruiter that you reach out to. But I have made connections on LinkedIn and have sent resumes over to hiring managers based on those messages I've received. So it does work, but it's just being as patient as you can with that person, knowing that they may not get back right away, and then reaching out to multiple contacts is always a good way to do it. But I do have people on LinkedIn reach out to me all the time. The other thing I will say is that we do have on the talent acquisition team people that are in roles that are focused on sourcing. And so we have people that spend their days reaching out to people on LinkedIn. So keep an eye on your inbox too. And I would make sure that you receive help, whether it's with your career services department, alumni group, or even just a tutorial online, making sure that your LinkedIn profile is robust. We absolutely use that, at least in pharma, to identify candidates and to reach out to candidates. There are people whose job it is at Takeda, for example, that will be looking for candidates, looking for background. So again, customizing that profile, making sure that you're calling out your skill sets is important.
So we have another question coming up here on how to reach out through LinkedIn. And one thing that occurs to me is that I'm not a recruiting person, and yet people reach out to me all the time for advice on getting jobs in my industry or in places where I either work or have worked. And I do find those to be, if it's repeated, to be intrusive and inappropriate often. If these are cold calls, like somebody I don't know, I'll get repeated messages asking for advice. So what kind of standards do you think, what's the difference between reaching out on LinkedIn to someone who, say, the head of the department that's looking to hire someone, and then reaching out to the recruiter?
It's really interesting, Celeste. We do have leaders at Takeda that will respond to people that have reached out to them on LinkedIn. So I don't think that it's off limits, but I do recommend proceeding with caution, and I would not recommend sending multiple messages to check in. I think that that can be intrusive. So it's again knowing where the person on the other side of the screen is coming from. If they're ahead of something at Takeda, they're obviously very busy. They also will have goals to hire great people too. So it doesn't hurt to reach out, but also using caution. And I think from like a recruiter perspective, you can always reach out to recruiters, and ultimately that can be your entry point into connecting with a hiring manager if there's an interest in your background. So it's interesting, right? Because recruiters and hiring managers often will prioritize their time by speaking to candidates that have the right qualifications for the role. So I think the informational interview side of the coin is how can you use your network to be connected with folks to then touch base and learn more about their industry and hopefully make a connection through that way. So yeah, there are multiple ways to do it, basically.
Okay, we got this one from Ruth Britt who says, "Good morning. How do I make my resume stand out? With the current competitive job search, it seems difficult to be able to make my skills really stand out."
It is hard. I know recruiting is hard right now, and it's also always hard to put yourself out there and find the job of your dreams, right? I would say one thing that I've seen that I like is if you have um, obviously your name and information at the top, right? Duh. And then underneath, if you can call out the skills required of the job in like it's almost like listed at the top. I like to see that if it's like if there's
Oh,
different
interesting.
programming tools that you're an expert in. Like that's kind of nice to see. The education can go towards the end, honestly. If you're just graduating and are pulling on your educational experience to make you sorry to qualify you for a job, then put that up at the top. The education should be at the top. But if you're an experienced professional or been out of school for like 2 to 3 years, you can put the education at the end. We'll always look at that anyways. But again, customizing your resume for the job that you're applying to is paramount. And then listing the skill sets that's required in the job description. Again, this all takes time and it can be painful, but making sure that you're calling out that skill set. You can bullet it at the top, like it's almost just like just words, commas, whatever it is that you like as far as a format. That can be nice to see because we will look at that. And when a recruiter or a sourcer is searching for people on LinkedIn, those keywords will come up and then we'll see, oh, this person has this specialty in this type of whatever it is. And then we will look at profiles that way too.
Okay, couple questions here about cover letters. The first one is, do recruiters read cover letters, especially at your current company? Would a recruiter or hiring manager consider a candidate who knows somebody that used to work at the company? In other words, in that cover letter, if you know someone at the company, should you mention it?
I would say that, again, this is my perspective. I do not look at cover letters. So one of the reasons is that if you're a job searcher and you're applying to multiple jobs, it's very hard to customize cover letters for each different position that you're applying to. So there often will be errors and it's just human, right, to do that. So again, recruiters are super busy. They're going to be looking through resumes. They're clicking in their system that they use at their company and go right to the resume. That's what I do, and I'm assuming that's what other people do too. Cover letters can be really helpful if you are changing industries and you want to tell your story as to why you're wanting to do that. But again, making sure it's thoughtful, you're taking the time to customize it for the job is super important. I wouldn't say that that's required by any means, but if you wanted to add that in there, you can. Um, as far as knowing someone at a company, the best way to call that out is to have that person refer you to a position. So, for example, at any large company, and I'm saying that as a blanket statement, I'm assuming there is a mechanism to refer a candidate. So if you know John that works at Apple or whatever, and they'll have a system like we have at Takeda where an employee can send a link to a referral, they apply, and then they're tagged as a referral in our system. That is hands down the best way to have a recommendation from someone that's at the company currently.
Okay, a question from Terry. Should we systematically thank everyone we meet with immediately after an interview?
I really like thank you emails, and in some cases, it feels like they're a thing of the past, right? Not all candidates do it, but I really appreciate it. I've seen two approaches. So one is they'll email the entire interview panel at once, and I think honestly that's okay. It's a fast-paced world. We're all busy. We're gonna, look at that email and appreciate that call out. The one thing is that in some cases you won't have the email addresses from the interviewers for privacy or confidentiality reasons. So I oftentimes will receive a thank you email from the candidate as the recruiter and then forward it along to the interviewers. So that's also an option, but I would recommend to write a thank you email. An email is, I mean, I know we used to write handwritten notes. That's what we all did back in the day, but email is absolutely the best way to do it.
Okay. Is there a difference in how you receive resumes, either directly or through LinkedIn?
So I guess, I will start by saying every candidate that's hired at a company needs to apply through the company's website. So, in tandem with any other way that you're sending your resume over, you should be applying. And I think, and whoever mentioned the LinkedIn, our positions are posted on LinkedIn. So, that is another way of applying, right? Because that'll go right to
Right.
our applicant tracking system, is what we call it. So, applying to the role officially is very important. You must do that. And then you can have other ways to send your resume, whether it's like emailing it to a contact that you have at the company. Again, if you're being referred, you want that person to officially refer you in the system as well. So I think my best advice is to make sure that you're applying in the system. And then if there are other ways to have that resume shared, that's totally fine too.
Okay, sometimes companies have multiple positions open that a candidate may be interested in. Is it best to focus on one of the opportunities, or is it okay to apply to multiple job openings?
It is absolutely fine and encouraged to apply to multiple jobs because in some cases, of course, a candidate would never know if like someone had been selected for the role that they applied for while they were applying, right? So I just think apply to as many positions as you are interested in. I really want to stress though that it's important that you're qualified for the roles that you apply to, um, because then you're not you're setting up the expectation that you're aware of your skill set and what you're qualified for at a company, as opposed to just blindly applying to roles that look interesting. It's more the reality is you will likely not get a call back for a position that you're not qualified for, right? So it's what positions are interesting in tandem with what you're qualified for, and then apply to as many of those as you'd like.
All right, we have 2 minutes left. I'm going to see if we can get two questions in the last 2 minutes. One is, I'm wondering if you have tips for not quite a career change, but changing where people place you. For example, I have a degree in chemistry. Everyone wants to put me in a lab, but I'd rather work in an office with people. How should I adjust my skills to accomplish that?
Great. That's a really good question. So, in the pharma industry, there's a lot of people that have worked on a lab bench and are looking to make a switch into a more corporate type role. So I think pharma is perfect for someone with that background. We hire scientists all the time into more office based type roles. So take a peek at, various pharma company websites. I think that's a great way to start. See what's out there. I think that's so obvious, but it's like looking at company websites. What is posted? What looks interesting to you? Do your research. So, to answer your question, there's definitely opportunities where a life sciences degree is valued in an office setting.
Okay, last question here. What is a good way to answer the question about why I quit my job if the reason could result in me having to speak negatively about that employer?
A lot of people don't like it when candidates say anything negative about a past employer. So that's one piece of advice, is that it does look poorly on the candidate during an interview. They think that that negativity could carry over into their new role. So I would always stay away from that. Um, I think you can be honest and say that it just wasn't the right fit for you any longer and you decided to move on. In many cases, companies are doing reference checks, so that is something that they'll um, be looking into anyways, as far as uh, character review or whatever it is, like skill set. There's a reference check that's generally done before an offer is extended. So I think it's being honest, staying away from negative comments about a past company, and just saying that it was no longer the right fit for you, that you wanted something different. For example, we'll have people that have been in various roles at smaller companies, and if they're wanting to come to a larger company, they'll use that reason, like they want, you know, to work in a larger organization. You can really focus more on the company that you're applying to and why you're interested in that one specifically.
Well, we are out of time, although I'm sure that people still have lots of questions. I wanted to say thank you to you, Katie. Thank you so much for all of your insights, your honesty, your great advice. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Celeste. And if anyone would like to connect with me on LinkedIn, please feel free to. It's been a pleasure talking to you all. Thanks so much.
On behalf of the Massachusetts Conference for Women, we really hope everyone enjoyed today's virtual career fair and this Ask the Recruiter session. If you haven't done so already, I really urge you to upload your resume, because you can maximize your interactions with participating employers like Takeda today. I will be back at 1:30 p.m. Eastern. That is the time for our next Ask the Recruiter session. So until then, we wish you all the luck on your job search. Thanks for being with us.